Power on.
This episode of TIE Fighter Renegades is dedicated to Jeremy Bulloch. The armor is nothing without the man beneath it. It's TIE Fighter Renegades, a Star Wars podcast.
Ooh, the man of tomorrow is here, and it is time for a little TIE Fighter Renegades, as we are wont to do. And when I say we, that means me and the man Robin Freebeard. Robin, man, welcome back to TIE Fighter Renegades.
Yeah, this is the way.
Yeah. Ooh. Oh, is it? And, I know it's really, this is a quick turnaround because, I mean, we had just released our latest episode a couple weeks ago, but man, we really do have to talk about The Mandalorian. Season 2 has been wrapped up, and there is so much other news that has dropped since then that
it's been quite a barrage.
Yeah. I mean, boy, if anyone was ever wondered whether or not we could do TIE Fighter Renegades for the next decade, let me assure you, there's going to be plenty of content to talk about, even if we just talked about Star Wars. Even though we do like to broaden our scope often enough on this show, and we certainly have some broader scope subjects to get into in this episode as well. But I guess we'll open it up, get a little myopic on, unfortunately. Well, I don't want to call it celebrated, but we remembered David Prowse in the last episode, who had recently passed due to COVID. And interestingly, a day before the season finale of season 2 of The Mandalorian dropped, which, of course, Boba Fett is all over the place, Jeremy Bulloch passed away, who, for those that don't remember him, he's the original guy that played Boba Fett. He did the voice too as well, correct, Rob? I mean, he was in the suit and the voice. Yeah,
up until they took him out after the prequels and they re-edited the original trilogy.
Right, and because then they put in
Tamara Morrison.
Tamara Morrison, yeah. Then they put in Tamara's voice. And I mean, even though still, like, the guy in the suit that you're seeing in Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and I could be wrong. I thought that they might have put him in because they added Boba Fett to A New Hope with the special edition in 97. But I'm not sure. He doesn't say anything, but I'm not sure if the guy in the suit walking by in the newly reinserted Jabba scene was actually Jeremy Bulloch. But I do know Jeremy Bulloch did have a cameo role in episode 3. He was there. Was it Captain Colton or something like that? That he was in that. So he did get to appear. Go ahead.
He was part of the special editions too, because when they added scenes to the Jabba Palace scene, and Boba Fett's flirting with the dancers, I believe that was Jeremy Bulloch as well. Right,
where he kind of touches the chin of one of Jabba's dancers. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, he's certainly still a part of Star Wars. He wasn't entirely erased from it in any way. But certainly, his voice isn't there the same way that it used to be. Admittedly, me personally, I do still, usually when I think of Boba Fett's voice, and maybe this will change over time and for reasons that we will discuss in an upcoming or a story that we're going to get to in this episode, I still always hear Jeremy Bulloch's voice. Like when he says he's no good to me dead, I don't hear Morrison. I hear Jeremy Bulloch whenever I think of that line.
Yeah. Same
how about
here.
you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, a lot of that probably has to do with the fact that I haven't watched the re-edited versions of Star Wars in really a long time. I haven't even seen the new ones that they did.
You mean the Blu-rays?
Yeah, no, I haven't seen the Blu-rays. I haven't seen the Disney Plus version.
With McClunky added in.
Yeah, I still watch the despecialized editions whenever I feel like watching the OT.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll admit, I mean, I can't say that I've watched the Blu-ray versions or the Disney Plus versions, which, as far as I know, the only major addition to the Disney Plus versions is the adding in of McClunky by Greedo, in A New Hope. I mean, I've watched the Blu-ray versions a lot, but because I'm a Blu-ray guy, but I definitely haven't watched them as much as I watch like the VHS versions, or be it the special editions or like the last edition that came out in '96. Those would rank as the ones I've watched the most. So sure, I can hear that. And
yeah, I mean, I'm a Blu-ray guy too, but I didn't buy the Star Wars Blu-rays on purpose because the one thing that as a visual artist sort of person that ticked me off is the quote color correction that they did on the Blu-rays. To me looks just dreadful, and so I'm not going to pay good money for what to me looks like garbage.
Yeah, no, I hear that. And as far as like Blu-rays of Star Wars, I actually don't have many because I'm really waiting for like those more, shall we say, majestic sets to come out. I don't. It's very convoluted, I feel, right now, getting Blu-rays for any aspect of Star Wars, from Clone Wars to Rebels to the movies to whatever. I mean, like it's really a convoluted mess.
Right.
So I can hear that. Anyway, so Jeremy Bulloch, he did just pass. I didn't realize how active he was. He still, got in quite a bit of work, either voice work, not with Star Wars necessarily, but he was doing the business. I know Mark Hamill did a great post about him saying he was just the consummate English gentleman, very nice guy. Again, I never really followed him that much, even though I loved the character of Boba Fett. I did find it interesting. I mean, I don't know, to be so tied in with that character and for your death to happen, like right as major things are happening around that character. Just odd synchronicity, I suppose. But anything you want to add in on Jeremy Bulloch, Rob?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't have any personal experiences with him, and I didn't really follow him that much either. I know he did do like the odd convention now and then, and so I always have respect for the actors who would go out and interact with the fans, and he was one of those. And I heard that he was you hear from other fans that have met with him or got stuff signed from him. He was, like I said, he was a consummate English gentleman. He was a very nice guy, and so it's a tragedy whenever we lose one of these people.
Agreed. So yeah, absolutely. Certainly I think The Mandalorian overall, the series will stand as somewhat of a testament to the power of, I think, the character of Boba Fett, which he was certainly key to. I think we should just get into it. We reviewed, go ahead.
It should be said that, I mean, like, would there even be a Mandalorian show if Boba Fett wasn't that popular?
Yeah, no. Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't think it would be. In fact, it's a great point for you to bring up. Something we talked about with David Prowse was like, sure. I mean, Jeremy Bulloch got to do voice and suit, as to where David Prowse didn't really get to do the voice. He was only in the suit, but his presence in the suit was so powerful. Credit's got to go to Jeremy Bulloch. The Boba Fett suit looks cool, but you do have to walk the walk in something like that. And he did. And Boba Fett's, the reason that so many stories in comic books like Twin Engines of Destruction, or Twin Engines of Destruction, and all these other things. I mean, the reason these became a thing is because there was just that aura of cool, just like Vader had the aura of power. I think Boba Fett had that aura of cool. Right. And he became an internet sensation and became so much, even with so few lines and so little screen time, because of that. And Jeremy Bulloch totally delivered. In fact, that might be worth talking about when we talk about The Mandalorian. But did you have other thoughts on that?
No, it just occurred to me, like we wouldn't even have this show if it wasn't for the character of Boba Fett. I mean, like, it was just the mysteriousness and cool factor about him that made that the Mandalorian, and the interest in Mandalorians period possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the mystery was a big part of it, but again, still, I think Bulloch's performance had to reflect that cool. I mean, if he was going to, walk past a blast door and hit his head, like a certain stormtrooper, I don't think it would have worked so well.
No.
Yeah. We wouldn't have the mystique that we had for so long with the character. Yeah. Well, anyway, let's talk about The Mandalorian, because now we reviewed up to episode 6. In the last episode of TIE Fighter Renegades that we did. And so we had 2 episodes past that, episode 7 and episode 8. And wow. I mean, this, I guess we should just start saying it. And we'll talk about episode 7 and episode 8. But I think everybody's basically talking about episode 8 as far as that goes. And also, we are going to have a bit of an overview here. This is the rare show that I can't believe every single episode just somehow got better and better as it went on. And it was without fail. There was no like downslope episode. Like everything, it just kept going up, 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 and just kept, the stakes got higher. And I think that's remarkable. I mean, because you can have, a general, and granted, when you're only dealing with 8 episodes total, maybe it's an easier feat, but with a lot of other shows, yeah, you have a great opening, things calm down for, a couple episodes, then in the middle it gets hot again, calm down for a couple episodes, and then, it picks up for a cliffhanger finale of some kind, perhaps. But no, this one just kept raising the bar, and it was able to do that, obviously, because it was pulling from so much Star Wars lore, from so much of Star Wars' past and things that, well, like Ahsoka, Bo-Katan, and go down the list. It's just, there is a lot of lore, a lot of mythology to pull in, and to finally be able to have that precious moment, because I don't know that we're ever going to see this sort of thing again, where you had so many popular elements that had yet to make their way to live action, to be able to bring them in, and bring them to reality. That's part of what made this so exciting. Right. I don't know that there are that many things other than, say, like Thrawn or Ezra, those kinds of characters. There aren't that many things left, I would think, that could command the same excitement by bringing them to the screen finally in live action. Yeah,
probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, and I know we've talked about this before, but the great thing is like about all of this is it's finally paying off to be a Star Wars fan.
Right. Yeah, that's what we were saying last time, was that, like having all of this knowledge, having consumed all of this content, be it the Clone Wars, whatever, now, like it's all coming together and finally making sense. And like you say, paying off.
Right.
Like there's a point to it. And I agree with you completely on that.
In fact, I should note this is that I've even had some interactions with some people who haven't watched the Clone Wars or Rebels. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, I'm finding it increasingly difficult to relate to those fans.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of people go ahead.
And I can understand why some of the people haven't watched that stuff, and it is a time investment. I get it. Yep. But at the same time, it's sort of like, it's like you haven't done your homework. And I'm here again. I'm having an increasingly hard time relating to fans who say, "Well, I just didn't feel any sort of emotional connection to the character of Ahsoka when she showed up because I'm not familiar with her at all." I can't relate to that anymore.
Yeah. Well, and that's a great point. And it's interesting. I think a lot of people are finally, because even if they're not emotionally connecting, they're still loving what they're seeing on the screen, I think. And I think it is inspiring people to go back and watch Clone Wars and Rebels. And what I'm glad about is that, because, guys like you and I, Rob, I mean, we've been telling these people for years, like, no, you don't understand. Star Wars is really awesome still. You just got to go watch Clone Wars, or you got to go watch Rebels. And that's where all the great shit that you remember is still happening, or even bigger and better. And, it's funny because people are saying, wow, The Mandalorian is so great. And it is. Like, there's no argument on this show that, how great The Mandalorian is. but there's great Star Wars, and I think in this vein that that you can, there years worth with Clone Wars and Rebels that you can go back to. We're just finally getting that level of Star Wars because finally Disney let Filoni do it in live action,
right?
And so we're getting the payoff. So go ahead.
I guess the message that I'm really trying to get down to is it's time people, let go of whatever baggage that if that's what's been holding them back from watching Clone Wars because they didn't like the prequels. It's time to give that up.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
If what stopped you from watching Rebels is because it was a Disney show, it's time to give that up.
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree with you. Yeah, I think the numbers are going up and people that can watch. And the other thing that people I also don't think get, like, okay, it's an investment to watch, 6-7 years, quote unquote, of Clone Wars. I understand that.
Yeah.
But also you can watch Clone Wars, especially Rebels, not so much, but you could still do it. But you can watch Clone Wars in a very abridged version. There's great guides out there. If I think of it, I'll link to one. But there are great guides out there that give you the main story arcs to watch it within. Right. Clone Wars is also confusing too, because it's not chronological. If you watch it in airing order, like things in season 3 happen before things that happen in season 1. It can be very confusing.
There are guides out there for watching it in chronological order too. In fact, something I did years ago, and it was a post on Reddit that got referenced over and over throughout the years because I would get notifications and message people is that I went through and took the chronological order and linked it to the episodes on Netflix so that people could just go down the list in chronological order and it would take them immediately to that episode. And from what I've seen is somebody else has now gone through and done that for Disney Plus.
Nice. Yeah, so that's really it, is that, you can get through Clone Wars, you can hit the high notes, you can get that passion for the character of Ahsoka and so on in a very short period of time. Like, you do not have to watch 7 years worth of Clone Wars at all. When I was taking Ellen through it, I mean, we watched it in the abridged form and I thought it was perfect. Like, it was actually, I don't want to call it a better experience, but it was a very satisfying experience to watch it in a more abridged form. And she totally got it. And, she was excited as anybody else when Ahsoka finally came to live action and came on screen. So it works. You really can do it this way.
That may be the way to do it, because I mean, like and any television show, not every episode is a winner. And that's certainly the case with both Clone Wars and Rebels. So, I mean, there's the long running joke that Brian and I have about filler episodes, and you will miss some small points because, like, Dave Filoni likes to make the point that he doesn't do filler episodes because the stuff always comes up again later on, being more important later on. Like, the perfect example is space whales.
Yeah, the Purgles. Yeah,
the Purgles. So I mean, so you will miss out on a few minor things, a few references later down the road. But then again, you're also going to miss out on some of the duds, like the Jar Jar episodes. Yeah,
that's exactly what I was going to say with Clone Wars, is that, like, you can skip almost every Jar Jar episode. I mean, there's just they don't do anything. And that's no disrespect to Ahmed Johnson, right? Ahmed Best. Sorry, Ahmed Johnson's a wrestler. No. Anyway, yeah.
I mean, it's all about the writing in the end. I mean, And
there's an audience that those are for, and that's abundantly clear. And that's not me or most anybody, but that's fine. Like, I don't need everything to be about me, to love it. So, So anyway, I do think that Mandalorian season 2 is going to inspire people to go and really look back. I mean, I will say, you know what? Okay. I mean, I know we're talking about the Mandalorian, but side subject, since we ended up talking about Clone Wars and even, Rebels a bit. I don't feel like Clone Wars did Boba Fett any favors, because we get a young Boba Fett in that. But for lack of a better way of putting it, I don't usually like to use these terms, but I'm going to use it here. I mean, he's just a whiny brat. Like, in,
Yeah,
in Clone
but
Wars.
I mean, you could say the same about Anakin, in episode 1.
Yeah, but you needed to see him as a kid for him to be really innocent, to understand just how far down the dark hole he went. Like I think that makes sense. But I kind of feel like none of that did Boba Fett any favors. That's my opinion on it.
Yeah, but then again, I mean, to me, Boba Fett was never really the. I mean, I guess you could say he was the focus of some of those episodes, but it always seemed to be more about the bounty hunters surrounding him.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think introducing those characters and getting to know those characters is important. I mean, you could definitely see how what's her name? I'm blanking. The tall white with the long fingers.
Oh, not Zamweasel, because that's the shapeshifter.
Right.
Aura Singh.
Right? You could see like how like the kind of impact Aura Singh had on Boba Fett in his former years, and the same thing with Cad Bane. All these people, all these bounty hunters had an influence on who would become, Boba Fett.
Yeah. I think that. Yeah, I think you're right about that you can see like where all those elements kind of come together. It's like, how does somebody become this amazing bounty hunter, in this hardened character? And you did get to see that, but he just, I don't know. I feel like they could have played it off a little bit differently. I mean, I'll say this for Mandalorian season 2, what little Jango Fett is talked about, his legend only grows, in my opinion, with this. I mean, like you walk away from season 2 of Mandalorian thinking, wow, Jango Fett was a badass. Even though all we saw him when was in episode 2, he was a fucking badass. And that's amazing when you can pull that off with just a few lines and, more or less with just like the son of that character, So I almost feel like you get more of that, more so than even Boba Fett getting highlighted as great of a character ultimately, minus what I think about in the Clone Wars, ultimately that he is. So, okay.
And it was nice that the Mandalorian finally confirmed for us that Jango Fett was a true Mandalorian.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Everything that, I mean, again, and I know we talked about this last time, because in episode 7 and 8 of season 2, did this even more, like the building up of basically a third faction in the Star Wars universe, outside of Rebel and Empire, to have the Mandalorians is just the smartest thing that they could have done, because there's no rules. There's very little on the line, because you're crafting a subculture as you go. And that's a rare thing you get to do in life or in fiction. And I mean, they've taken it and run with it. It does lead me to, so I mean, I guess we can talk a little bit about episode 7 and 8. We've been hitting a bit of an overview of season 2 overall, but so Din does end up getting the Darksaber from Moff Gideon. There is a apparent power struggle that is probably going to get resolved in season 3 of The Mandalorian, which we do know is going to happen. Where he just wants to hand it over to Bo-Katan, right? Because that's all she's interested in, is just she wants, the Darksaber so that she can rule Mandalore. Now, I mean, we know how all that works. If you've watched Clone Wars or Rebels, you understand the whole politics behind that. And it's a very funny moment when he's like, all right, fine, here, I yield. It's yours. Take it,
Right.
It was really well done. It's confusing. She says she can't just take it. She has to win it by combat, more or less. But in Rebels, Sabine, who ends up owning the Darksaber, she just hands it over to Bo-Katan. And so there does seem to be a contradiction here, as far as that goes. I mean, have you heard anything, any explanation? Has anybody tried to touch on this?
Yes.
Okay.
And I will admit that it's not a perfect explanation.
Uh-huh.
But the explanation that I got was, and even Moff Gideon or somebody mentions that, it's about the legend of the Darksaber itself.
Yeah.
And how it comes into a person's possession. Bo-Katan did turn down the dark saber the first time Sabine tried to give it to her in Rebels.
Okay.
And it was only after the battle on Mandalore where, everybody, basically pledged their allegiance. All these different clans pledged their allegiance to Bo-Katan that she took the saber from Sabine finally. So in that sense, she had kind of earned it by rite of passage and by being recognized as, the legitimate leader of all these, these different clans.
So basically she conquered the clans, and so she earned it that way.
Right.
Because like Sabine was part of a specific clan. Okay. I mean, I guess I can get that. I'm sure Filoni has something in mind. I mean, he wrote the shit in Rebels, so it's not like it wasn't his in the first place. Go ahead.
It does lead to an interesting possibility in my mind is that, the name of the show is The Mandalorian. And we just thought it's, a Mandalorian. But what if this show ends up being about the Mandalorian? Like the Mandalorian, the Mandalore. What if he is like,
Got it. So like what if Din becomes like Mandalorian 1?
Yes,
basically.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. What if he's not longer just a Mandalorian, but he is the Mandalorian?
That would be so now in the old EU, that's basically what happened to Boba Fett. Boba Fett eventually became like the king of Mandalore.
Right.
In much later books. That's after the New Jedi Order stuff. I mean, like that's much later on books, but he which you would think is crazy for how does this, lone gunman bounty hunter end up becoming like the president of his people, or, the leader of an entire race, of an entire planet. Right. But it worked. I loved it. I thought it was a great evolution of the character in the old EU for Boba Fett. And as we've said many times, even though now, yes, we do have Boba Fett actually in the show, the Mandalorian, Din Djarin was clearly meant to be basically an avatar for probably what Jon Favreau wanted Boba Fett to be, that's the character he really wanted to play with. He just didn't necessarily have permission. And maybe it gave them a lot more creative freedom for it not to be. Right. And I would certainly agree that it did. If they want to take that same path with Din Djarin, where he ends up becoming, Mandalore the Great, then I'm up for that. I think that's fine.
Yeah. And the other problem is I don't think that I think even if Bo-Katan won the Darksaber by combat, I don't even think that she would necessarily be recognized as the true leader of the Mandalorians, because she basically already failed once before.
That's a good point. That's interesting. Well, we still have to find out more about like what the Great Burn is. We don't have answers on that. That's fine that we don't have answers on that, because we need some more mystery now that Grogu is seemingly on his way. So okay, that's. Yeah, I think that's an interesting point to bring up. And also, I mean, I guess if we're talking possibilities for future episodes and for season 3, I would venture Sabine Wren's got to show up, here soon. I mean, we know she's she's the head of Lothal now, right? Isn't she like the governess or something of Lothal?
Well, she was, but I mean, the story is that it seemed to imply at the end of Rebels that Ahsoka shows up and they were going to go look for Ezra together.
Right. They ran off. Okay. Yeah, you're right. You're right about that. Yes. Yeah. Well, anyway, I think it's another character that you could bring in, and it's a good bet that they're going to, or if not in this, there's another TV show that'll be there that was announced that she might show up in. Of course, we'll get to that. But there's still, I guess there are still some characters really to bring to life into live action that could get people very excited. And again, just a super smart move that, well, I don't know how intentional it was, but I really do think, like you were talking about earlier, that people are going back and watching Rebels and Clone Wars now that they want to know everything they can about the Mandalorian, and what's happening in that universe. And really, that's the only place you can go to get more explanation on it all. So, okay, well, all of that I think makes sense. Um, I, I mean, the thing that everybody's really talking about, and that we might as well get into at this stage, because it doesn't matter. I think for many people, it really doesn't matter what even happened in the previous 7 episodes. What even happened in the previous anything up to the last 10 minutes of episode 8 of The Mandalorian. Of course, Grogu in episode 6, I think it was, Grogu is calling on some Jedi. We don't know who the hell he's signaling to. And there is some mystery as to how exactly the Jedi that does show up ended up finding Grogu wherever he happened to be. And I don't know if there's been any great explanation on that, unless it was like Force time or something along those lines. I mean, the less that's thought about, the better.
Yeah, I was going to say, how much does that really matter?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. Ultimately, it doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, like Jedi are able to reach out and sense events throughout the galaxy. I mean, like straight from the first Star Wars movie when Obi-Wan Kenobi senses the destruction of Alderaan. You know, there's the Force works galactically. So to me, it's not a huge issue how Luke finds Grogu. Obviously, a connection was made because even Grogu felt the connection to Luke when he showed up because he's putting his hand on the monitor. Right.
He feels that, okay, here it is. Here's my home.
Yeah, right. Here's the one I've been, calling to.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, my experience, as soon as I saw the X-Wing, I mean, and we talked about this, that I mean, I was not expecting Luke, even though you laid out a great theory that no, it would be Luke, I think we both kind of talked about it, where like Luke and Ahsoka eventually meeting is just going to be a really powerful thing. So bringing Luke into the Mandalorian timeline is just lending itself to great drama and great stories. So we weren't opposed to Luke. We thought that it made sense that it would be Luke. I was was still very up in the air. I mean, and that it could have been Ezra.
We talked about Ezra too,
Yep,
so I mean,
Cal Kestis.
Right.
I mean, you can make arguments for a lot of them. Hell, I even saw stories, and they're dead wrong, but whatever, stories about Mace Windu coming back at this point, and I was like, no, that's just that takes too long to explain. Like you can't just do that. Even though we might talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah,
this episode.
Oddly enough.
Yeah, ironically. So anyway, as soon as I saw the X-Wing, like I grabbed Ellen's hand because I knew exactly what was happening. We were watching it together, and I just knew it was going to be Luke. There's no other. It wouldn't have made sense to have Ezra show up in an X-Wing. There's no other answer that would have made sense. As soon as you saw the X-Wing, you should instantly know, because I mean the only other person you could attach that starship to would be Wedge Antilles, and that just wouldn't have made any damn sense. There was, and I mean, you stop breathing, and you see the black cloak, and you're still not breathing and the lightsaber ignites, and it's on. And I think I cried because. And I want to hear your experience of it too, Rob, but I just want to say this, and we've said this many, many, many times on TIE Fighter Renegades. All J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson had to do was give us the green lightsaber igniting and Luke kicking some ass. And that's all those movies ever had to do. And people would have walked out of them and they would have been talking about them for the next 50 years. And they didn't do it. But they're going to talk about the season 2 finale for the next 50 years because it's exactly what they did. And the reaction from everybody on the internet, just about everybody with few exceptions, was fucking amazing. That was awesome. And it just proved that we were absolutely right, that's all you had to do. And you're going to make everybody happy because the legend of Luke Skywalker is that goddamn strong. And they did it. And it was a phenomenal moment, absolutely phenomenal moment. But I mean, how about you? What was your experience when it clicked?
I mean, to quote shout out Mapes from Dune, when one has lived with prophecy for so long, the moment of revelation is a shock.
I love it. Yes. Yeah.
I just, like the whole time, when I see the X-wing land, I'm like going, is it him? Is it really him? Like, and it wasn't until there's a specific shot where Luke holds out his hand to force push a dark trooper, and you see the black glove,
Yes.
and it's like, oh my god, it's really, really him.
Yeah. Yeah, then there's absolutely no doubt at that point.
Yeah. And it was just, like I said, it was just it was as much as we had talked about it being a possibility, you're in a state of disbelief.
Yes. Yeah, there it is. That I mean, because we hadn't seen that since 1983, not in live action.
No.
So for nearly 40 years later, for a lot of people, for that to finally happen, that is a literal once in a lifetime moment. Because you can the emotional impact, the overall impact of that can only happen when you've had 40 years to wait, for it to occur.
Well, not only that, is when you had, those 20 some odd years of novels, comic books that were all, basically telling the legend of what Luke Skywalker, the Jedi Master, would become at his height.
Right.
And to finally see that appear in real life it's a once in a lifetime moment. We've lived the legends of this moment. Like I said, that just when we've lived with the prophecy of this moment for so long,
Yeah. I mean, and I knew whenever it would happen, and we could say it was a no-brainer, but I mean, the way that they fucked up Luke, previously, or Disney fucked up Luke previously, I don't know how much of a no-brainer it was, but before then, I mean, I could even when they recently re-released Jedi Academy, when they released it on the Nintendo Switch, the game, because Luke is heavily in that. And I still remember the chills when I first played Jedi Academy 20 years ago, but also at that point, the chills of seeing Luke Skywalker basically at full strength, even in a video game, was amazing, and you felt it. Go ahead.
And just as a side note, to mention another character that could generate a lot of excitement if they were to bring him back, Kyle Katarn.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's an ace. I mean, as well as Mara Jade, frankly.
Yeah. So I mean, there's still a few out there that they could pull off.
Yeah, that would excite people a lot. I agree with you completely. Yeah, but I mean, now so I listened back to the soundtrack for season 2, or the volume 2, which covered this episode of the soundtrack for The Mandalorian. And listening back to the music for that scene, I did hear more of the Luke Skywalker theme notes, basically in it. I did not hear them so much. Not that I have a great sound system or anything, but I mean, I have a subwoofer, it's not shit. When I first saw it, I felt like the music was very understated.
Yes. And
it was really a moment that could have that I think it would have been well served with some real John Williams bombast.
They toned it down a bit. And they really should have turned it up.
Yes. That's my only, and again, that's a nitpick because I mean, again, I'm in tears. You can't complain about that, watching it.
Yeah. And there are other nitpicks, but believe me, folks, we understand that the face wasn't perfect, and
sure, yeah, no, I hear
what
that.
I mean, that it to me, that it didn't detract enough from that sequence where I really cared, and I understand if some people do care, but I don't.
Yeah. So I felt like the music could have been a little bit different. The de-aging thing, I do want to talk about that. There were some criticisms about that. just like the lack of like exact music that I wanted for the moment, because I was wanting a Return of the Jedi moment, you know?
Right. And we got just like 90% of it.
Yes. Yeah. And just, but just like you said, it doesn't matter how bad that face looked. Nothing could ruin that, you know, because the action, the motions, all of that were totally right. Yeah, I would have loved for him to say more too, you know, like that would have been great. But yeah, I had no problem with the de-aging technology. I mean, I'm the same guy when this was kind of first done with Tron Legacy. I thought it was brilliant in 2010. Like I had no complaints. I don't care how fake it looked on Jeff Bridges. It was awesome. Like because it told the story, right? You know, it got the point across, and it did its best to make this as relevant a sequel as it could be to a film from 1982 or whatever.
Yeah.
Or 1984. Go ahead.
And I won't argue that it could have been done better with technology we have now. I mean, like people have already gone back and done a deep fake training AI with both Jeff Bridges and Tarkin from Rogue One and even Solo, and they look phenomenal. They do. But the thing is I don't think people realize is that is not an instantaneous process. Yeah, and I know that there's a deep fake of Mark Hamill with that Luke scene in The Mandalorian already out on YouTube. But I guarantee you that whoever did that had probably been training his AI with Mark Hamill's face for a very long time ahead of even knowing that Luke was going to be making an appearance.
Yeah. I mean, and something we do know that multiple studios have been dealing with is that during, COVID-19, some effect shots are getting finished by computers at home, by the special effects artists.
Right.
And I'll say this, there's times where I feel like, yeah, sure, they kind of skimped out, but this is one where, don't let a pandemic stop Luke Skywalker. No. I don't care if the face doesn't look perfect. If it's got to be finished at home and if it's a little bit of Photoshop work, but it gets the point across, I'm happy with that. Don't delay this. So that's okay. Like I can be understanding of that in this case. So yeah, I agree with you. I don't think people realize the amount of challenge involved, with that and the time that it takes and all of this.
It's not even that deep fake technology is really even that challenging or difficult to use. It's just a very time intensive process. I'm talking about literally weeks, if not months of training the AI to make it look really, really good.
Yeah. And I know some people, I guess maybe there might have been somewhat of a vocal majority saying, why didn't they just put Sebastian Stan in there? I think you would have, to do what they needed to do, which is, and I think Filoni personally, my personal opinion, I think he felt like I need to fix Luke Skywalker for the fans. And to do that, I think if you put Sebastian Stan in there, I don't think it would have had the same effect. No. That's fine if they want to put him in later. In fact, hell, in season 3, if Luke Skywalker comes back, go ahead, put in a new actor if you want. But the first time back, you needed that Luke Skywalker is getting fixed moment.
Yes.
And it had to be Mark Hamill.
I was just going to say, it had to be Mark Hamill's voice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which they did. And that was the total shock. I mean, Mark essentially misled all of us because he had said multiple times that his Star Wars acting days were done and over with. And I don't think he was being insincere when he said that the first time. I honestly believe that, Dave Filoni convinced him to come back.
Well, you said that. You said this. You yourself said this in the last episode. You said, I bet that Dave Filoni could convince Mark Hamill to come back.
He's the one person that I think they could do it, and he did, obviously. Yeah.
So you were totally right.
It had to be, it had to be the right person bringing the offer, and it had to be the right script to bring him back. Yeah. And it had to be something where Mark Hamill wasn't saying, I fundamentally disagree with everything you've decided about my character. It had to be where, the man himself, Mark Hamill, reads this and say, that's my Luke Skywalker.
Right.
And that's what we got.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the reaction really has been just overwhelmingly positive. Everybody, I mean, even the some of the staunchest critics, there's still people out there that are, just can't take a good thing when it comes their way.
Yeah,
sadly.
there are people that have a hate on for, Disney, and I get it, but at the same time, you're going down a road that I can't follow.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I mean, even people that have been rightfully very highly critical of the sequel trilogy have, come out and said, holy shit, that last episode of Mandalorian, I'm a 6-year-old again.
Right.
And boy, Mark Hamill being as cool as he is, that tweet of his, when he tweeted that Friday, that day, it's like, so anything good on TV today? Man. Again, like that's I always talk about I always I hate it when we talk, or I always fear the future where people talk about tweets as if like somehow it was an epic event that they had done. But no, that's a tweet that had basically 40 years of history behind it. That that's one worth talking about. and you can only do when it's been that much time between. Unbelievable. Yeah. So that was just an amazing moment. I really, again, I know we have nitpicks, or we can make nitpicks about it, but it did what it needed to do. That last 10 minutes literally saved Star Wars, not just for me, but I think a lot of people. It
felt right in all of the ways that it needed to.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, how do you feel about, basically it seems like we're going to get season 3 without Grogu. I mean, do you think the show's going to do all right? What are your...
No, I think I already gave my thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, I
think we're going to get more about Mandalorians, and I think that's what the show needs to be. I think one of the criticisms that I've heard that I somewhat, sympathize with is that Din Djarin just isn't a very interesting character yet.
Because all the concentration's been on the child.
Right. And the child's thing is just being cute, which, I get it. That's a valid criticism. So now it's time really to sit down and really develop the character of Din Djarin and find out who he really is.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I know some people felt that this was kind of anticlimactic for the story arc overall of Grogu. I don't really feel that. Like,
no.
What more are you going to do when Luke Skywalker shows up? Like that's it. It's the end of any story.
What more are you going to do with the child?
Right.
It'll be cool if, maybe we come back in another 10 years and we have, adolescent Yoda.
Sure.
Instead of baby Yoda. But,
sure.
There's only so much you could do with the baby.
Right. Yeah. Do you think that Grogu, and speculation, it's pure speculation at this point. Do you think Grogu's going to survive, the little Jedi purge that that Ben Solo is going to go through?
That's the question, isn't it? I mean, the only honest answer I can give is I don't know. I certainly hope so.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, Grogu still has the Mandalorian necklace. He still has the mythosaur around his neck.
Yeah.
I think he's still technically a foundling, still technically a Mandalorian. I think it'd be great if, at some point he says, yeah, I'm going back to Mandalore. I'm going to go hang with Daddy.
Yeah.
And he survives the whole thing.
Right.
I think that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously the character of Grogu did not exist, nor was in anybody's mind really, at the time that J.J. Abrams was making The Force Awakens, so obviously it makes sense why we don't have any reference to him at all whatsoever, before now. But I feel like ultimately that character already, even though its main shtick is that it's cute, that character's already so big, you can't just off it. You can't just have Kylo Ren, kill it, and then that's the end. Yeah. And we still have mysteries to explore around that. We got to find out. Well, wait, who's is Yaddle? Is that mommy? What's the history there? I still think there's a lot more to do with the character.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. It's like we don't even know how that species propagates itself. So, I mean, for all we know, it's we don't know if it was Yoda and Yaddle. We don't even know how that
sexual reproduction. Yeah,
right. We don't even know how that works for them. So
good point.
And given the fact that there seems to be so few of them and that they have such a long lifespan, that would maybe indicate that things aren't done through the normal process with that species.
Yeah. No, I think that's a fair point. Well, I think we still have a ton to look forward to with The Mandalorian. I mean, it's really like that was an awesome ending and very reminiscent of basically like season 2 of Rebels, where you just had one of the most amazing moments in the finale, of course, between Vader and Ahsoka.
Right.
In that case, it's one of those where it's a highlight, but just like Rebels went on with season 3 and 4 to do some of its best work or become like the show it was very much meant to be at that point. I think we're running into the same case here with The Mandalorian, where now it's going to become the show that it was ultimately meant to be.
Right.
It's like, okay, we fixed Star Wars. Now let's take The Mandalorian to the real heights we wanted to go to. So I'm still very excited. But I mean, I guess I'll ask you, season 2. I mean, give me your thoughts overall. Winner. I think that's obvious, but go ahead.
Yeah, 10 out of 10. I mean,
yeah, right.
I mean, just everything I have is nitpicks.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, they even managed to make the Bill Barr's character somebody that I liked.
Oh.
And like I didn't like his character in the season 1 episode. Didn't like him at all.
Yeah. Let's talk about that for a second. Yeah. So Bill Barr's character, this whole episode where, they basically have to steal a machine that would give them the codes to the location of where Moff Gideon's ship is. Okay. I was amazed as well. Like you said, how, hated the guy in season 1. And now season 2, it's like, oh no, he's awesome. Like what a great character.
Right.
Even though I keep having to like remind myself that he's not Joe Pantoliano, but because he talks and looks very much like him with the bald head.
Right. Well, I mean, that's a bit of a prejudice I have to get over too, because I'm not like a really big fan of like the both the Boston accent and I guess you would say like the archetypical, like arrogant Bostonian like attitude, which is very much part of his, shtick.
Right. Yeah. And I wasn't even familiar with him. I guess he's a comedian or has a podcast or whatever. And, I wasn't really familiar with him, but what a show stealing performance I think that he put in that episode. And not only that, I don't know. Do we know, like, was Dave Filoni in the military?
No,
I'm not sure. Go ahead.
I do know I don't know where you're going with this, but I do know fact like that his casting was actually because of Jon Favreau, and one of the like the comedy bits that Bill Barr had done before is he was actually making fun of like Star Wars fans.
Oh wow.
And so, like, then Jon Favreau approached him and said, I want you to, to be in the show, the Star Wars show. And like Bill Barr is apparently like, don't you know that like I have like this comedy bit where I make fun of Star Wars fan and Jon Favreau is just like, yeah, I think it'd be hilarious to have you in it just for that reason. And oddly enough, this is like I've watched some interviews with Bill Barr later on, and like he's like a genuine Star Wars fan now. Like he loves it, and he loves the fans, and he appreciates the enthusiasm and the passion, and so like I'm on board. Yeah, I guess you could say like I like the guy, both the actor and the character now.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that. Well, so what makes me what I think is very curious is that there is a strong pacifist theme, ironically, in a thing called Star Wars, that particularly shows in Dave Filoni's work. For example, of course, Barriss Offee, even though, I mean, she ended up becoming a terrorist, but she wasn't wrong about what the Jedi were doing, that like they had fallen to the dark side for getting involved in the war. There is the epic speech that I think Yoda gives to Ezra in Rebels, about how the Jedi were wrong and how the concept of winning is misnomer. Like it's not, like, that's not the goal. And like and then this, where, I mean, me, and I don't have to make it personal, but I can imagine there are a lot of veterans who, as I'm one of the U.S. Army, but I mean, I can imagine there are a lot of veterans who watched that scene where he blasted the captain right in the chest and said, "Yeah, man, I wish I could have done that." where I could just imagine where he really felt that. I mean, and I was not, I mean, I don't suffer from PTSD or anything, but like I was having, for lack of a better term, I was having almost flashbacks when they're driving in with the Rhodium. When him and Din are driving in, and and then like all the troops are saluting them. I mean, fuck, that felt right out of like Baghdad. For me. And I was amazed at how well that was presented, or how realistically, I should say, that was presented. And they kind of come off as heroes, but then, Bill Barr's character brings it all right back to, home, and says, this is, and it was awesome that they mentioned Operation Cinder. Like that was deep cut. That I know a lot of people are going to need explanation for. And of course they can go read Shattered Empire and get more of it. But it was incredibly realistic and really, I mean, for me, it hit home, and I can imagine for a lot of other people, it really did, saying like, what the fuck, all these people died. Why? What was the point to this?
Yeah. And
that is, especially for Star Wars, that is some deep, deep philosophical shit for it to get into. That I don't think any other show really, in fact, no, I've never seen anything that has the balls to get into that, not on live action. So I don't know. Yeah, I guess I wonder if Filoni somehow, because that pacifist element keeps running through his shows.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, it's not just, Dave Filoni. I mean, I think he got a lot of it from George. I mean, as George initially said, had the one Yoda say, wars make one not great.
Yeah.
I mean, and that was before we knew what the Clone Wars were even about.
Yeah, and I mean, we do know George Lucas certainly knows his military history,
right? And he intended, Star Wars to be a kind of an anti-war film from the beginning.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think Dave just really gets it. I think Dave really took to heart every interaction, conversation, lesson that George gave him.
Yeah.
He may be the only one that really understands Star Wars the way the creator does.
Well, he's really delivering. I mean, Filoni is, because that's not the only powerful message that I feel like has often been strung in Filoni's work. I mean, multiple times. In fact, even in this episode, it comes up again. Bill Barr mentions it, but also in season 1, when Din Djarin, first encounters the Sand People, again, the Tusken Raiders. And he basically says, it's the guy who's going around with them says, oh, these invaders. He's like, no, they think you're the invader. They were here first. And just this message of, respect really for, shall we say, indigenous peoples.
And you know what? I feel like a complete ass. I've been fucking up his name this whole time. It's Bill Burr.
Bill Burr, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Bill Barr is the
yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
He ripped on us. We got to rip on him for a few minutes. Yeah. Well, again, he's not somebody we were really familiar with beforehand. So, but there we go. Bill Burr.
Well, I was familiar with him in just more of like an infamous sort of way.
Sure. Yeah. Well, anyway, so, but yeah, there have really been some deeper subjects brought up, like anti-colonialist subjects.
Yeah.
I think that have been there. And I love it. I'm glad that it's there, because one of the critiques that's easy to make against Star Wars is that it doesn't really say anything. Well, Filoni's kind of changing that.
Right. And that's an interesting, I didn't really, I think I picked up on some level, but I obviously don't have the perspective of someone like yourself with a military background. That like, even when they're driving through that poor village, I mean, that looks like a scene that you could have taken out of any number of a dozen different, Vietnam movies.
Sure. Or even like Black Hawk Down or something. I mean, you could have ripped it right out of that.
Yeah.
And I mean, and it's like the irony is so thick, because again, like they're getting saluted as heroes as they drive into the Imperial Depot. And it's like, yeah, but you're the bad, like they're saluting over like this stupid resource, and then what's the point to all this? And it just, I mean, these are all thoughts that have gone through my head on things, and just to see it in any fiction is mind blowing to me, because science fiction or even fantasy overall has a real problem with many times with military glorification, and even Star Trek falls prey to this, and it was just remarkable to see this kind of messaging in it. So I got to give season 2 massive props for that episode alone. There's a lot more there than I think people realize.
And the one thing that I'll give, that you and I both give The Last Jedi props for was the character of DJ, which did, served a very similar function. And, just unfortunately, they threw it all away in the end.
Yeah, it became, like the message was good there. I agree with you. Yeah, like the message of don't join, like that. Right. That was awesome.
Right.
But,
and that both sides are basically the same, which is like same thing that Bill Burr's character was talking about, while they're doing their drive-through, like
this week it's this guy, next week it's this guy.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is. It is. It's a war's a racket. It's a bunch of bullshit, like.
Yeah, and again, that's a rare message in my opinion, and I'm just amazed that it's in something as quote unquote simple as Star Wars. That's really mind blowing to me. Yeah, and boy, real quick, just to mention another cool moment when Din Djarin is contacting Moff Gideon at the end of that episode, in the hologram, and basically quotes back everything that he said that Moff Gideon said to him at the end of season 1. That was perfect. I mean, that was like a Liam Neeson Taken moment. That was so cool.
There was something else I have to bring up about that particular moment too, where they do the shot of Gideon's ship. You get a close-up shot. That's a real model. That is not CGI.
Oh no shit! No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, because there are slight. If you stop it and really look at it, there are these, unless they CG modeled like the sort of like slight imperfections and lines that aren't like completely perpendicular or parallel, like you see on an actual like real model. Unless they did that in 3D, that's an actual physical model. That's
amazing. Wow. Bravo. I love it. Yeah. Actually, I'll bring up something else there too. Speaking of Moff Gideon's ship, people are, and speculate responsibly, but people are raising questions about the female like lieutenant commander or whatever that is under Moff Gideon, that seems to get an inordinate amount of camera time, but you never hear her name. There's people suggesting that might be Sabine, and when you look at her, there's a look. I'm just bringing it up. That maybe she kind of injected herself. Because if she's on the search for Ezra, or for Thrawn and Ezra anyway, kind of like Ahsoka was at the end of Rebels. Sabine's on that, mission as well. Yeah. Ahsoka thought Gideon was the key to this, or at least that was kind of the idea.
The only reason the only reason I'm going to shoot that down is you think she would have like revealed herself when Bo-Katan shows up. Yeah,
that's fair. Or you think Bo-Katan might have like recognized her. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting thought. I mean, I'm just tossing it out there that people are, that's a buzz that's going around, but who knows? Yeah. I mean, I'll say season 2, I agree with you, 10 out of 10. I wouldn't really change a thing. Everything I think, just delivered, landed. You got one of the best endings for a TV series in history, frankly. Remarkable. And we'll talk about this because it leads into our next story. We got a after credit scene or during the credits scene, which included Boba Fett and Fennec, right? Ming Na's character there, taking out Bib Fortuna.
Yeah.
And which was really cool.
How did he survive?
I know, right?
Yeah.
But I thought that was fantastic. It's like, that's Bib Fortuna.
Yeah. And I don't know if you noticed this, but the staff that Bib Fortuna has, which we've never seen in live action before.
Mm-hmm.
But
was that what the action figure had?
Yes.
I had the action figure.
Yeah,
okay.
so did I. Yeah, and
right.
Somebody pointed that out. I'm like, holy shit, you're not kidding. Like somebody was really paying attention.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's a deep cut too. I mean, that really goes back to 1985.
Yeah, that was a nice touch. And now, so that whole thing ended with the, announcement on the screen saying, coming in December 2021, the Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah.
So
and there was some initially confusion about it, whether or not, the Book of Boba Fett was going to be the Mandalorian season 3, or if it was this whole separate thing. But we have finally gotten confirmation from Jon Favreau, the man himself, that it is going to be its own separate show that airs alongside season 3 of The Mandalorian.
Yeah. So this is interesting because I feel like maybe they're going to. This is leading to that underworld universe that Star Wars appeared to have been planning before when they were talking about doing a Jabba the Hutt movie, when they were, going to do more, say, with Darth Maul or with Maul, and so on. That sort of Solo was leading towards, I mean, how do you feel about that? Go ahead.
If you recall, we were supposed to get a Boba Fett movie that was being directed by Josh Trank.
Yes.
And, and that was a huge lost opportunity, in my opinion, as was the canceling of the game Star Wars 1313.
Right.
Because that was also supposed to tell the story of a young adult Boba Fett.
Right. Yeah. So I can, we could speculate what the show is going to be about. It would appear Boba Fett's going to take over the underworld. I mean, it looks like it's exactly what he did, just by killing Bib Fortuna himself. But I mean, I could imagine there might be a lot of flashbacks.
I hope so. I certainly
It's easy enough to do because Orson sounds great still. He still sounds like a clone trooper. And so, all you got to do is have a guy in the armor, that's not, Morrison, playing Boba Fett, and he can just do the voice, and, you could explore the whole history of Boba Fett.
Right.
Yeah. And people will buy it too, because the Mandalorian's really proven that people don't care if they see Pedro Pascal or not. I'm excited as hell for that show. I mean, I think that's going to be an easy winner.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're going to talk about more about what's coming up, but I mean, it's an exciting time to be a Star Wars fan.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess why don't we go ahead and get into it and talk about what the big announcement that Kathleen Kennedy, big announcements really that Kathleen Kennedy made. Though, I mean, it's funny because those announcements were made before, they were made before season 2 ended, correct? Of The Mandalorian?
Yeah, like I think it was between episodes, 7 and 8 that this announcement was made.
Yeah, which is amazing because so basically Kathleen Kennedy announced 10 new shows and, in a movie and all this. And then all of that was exciting enough. And then you watch the end of Mandalorian season 2 and like, oh, actually there's even one more show that we're going to get.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Apparently they held it. Yeah. They held it back on purpose because they wanted the surprise to be, that extra scene.
Yeah.
That end credit scene. Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, it totally worked. Yeah, I was, well, let me say this. As much as I don't care for any of these streaming services, really fuck these streaming services. And we're going to talk about that too. We'll get into that. Disney Plus, just like, we were talking so much about HBO Max and, like their big plans and what they're doing and everything. Disney Plus basically just owned every single fucking streaming service on the planet. I mean, why? I don't even know why anybody else should bother doing TV. I mean, and that's not just, I mean, I don't like Marvel, but like, cause they made a ton of Marvel announcements too.
Right.
And Star Wars and Marvel are really, at parallel in popularity. I think that's fair to say. Yeah. I mean, Disney Plus just got everybody. Like they literally own the entertainment world right now. With this announcement, what do you say to that, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, it's the Nerd Channel.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, this is akin to like back in the day when the Sci-Fi Channel was announced.
Yeah,
This is where it's at.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't. I don't like it. I can't even. 10 years ago, I couldn't have even fathomed that somebody would announce 10 Star Wars television shows. Yeah. Like, I mean, I would have just, you'd be serving that with a side of cream jeans to me. I mean, that's insane.
We were happy with one.
Yeah. Right.
And two, like there was one that we were watching and then a second one announced. And, and that was like, that was enough to sell the service.
Right. Exactly. I'm still my mind is still having a hard time wrapping around as much Star Wars as Disney has put out there already, ever since 2013. I still can't fathom like 10 Star Wars shows. What the hell? And to just like, I mean, that was an atomic bomb dropping that, and it was totally pure strategy for, on Disney's part, because like they must have been holding on to this. And the fact that they were able, like this, nobody leaked any of this. Like some of these shows, we knew about some, we knew about Bad Batch, like some of these things we knew about.
Right.
But most of these we had no clue. And I mean, there's so much to talk about here. Like, it's almost like they waited for Warner Brothers to make their announcement about how, hey, in 2021, we're going to, release all of our movies on HBO Max and in theaters. Yeah. They waited for that bomb to drop, and then they just dropped two of their own. I mean, like out of nowhere. Unbelievable. Well, all right, let's talk about what actually got announced. I don't think it's unironic either that, because certainly Warner Brothers / HBO Max's biggest announcement was that, Wonder Woman 84 was going to be dropping on Christmas.
Right.
Well, then Disney Plus comes in Disney comes in and says, yeah, and the next Star Wars movie is going to be helmed by none other than Patty Jenkins, and it's going to be Star Wars Rogue Squadron. I guess, why don't we just break them down show by show or announcement by announcement, and let's talk about it. How do you feel about this Rogue Squadron movie? What are your thoughts?
Fantastic. I mean, I just, granted, I was always more of a fan of the X-Wing games than the Rogue Squadron games. But that's still like, that's a huge part of the Star Wars franchise. Sure. Anybody like just X-Wings in general, it's just such a huge part of the franchise.
Yeah, I mean, in the X-Wing novels, the Rogue Squadron,
right.
Ray Squadron novels, those were huge back in the day.
They were, yeah. And, I mean, it's a kind of ironic because, Kathleen Kennedy, like I think a year or two ago was complaining about, how hard it was to make Star Wars movies and we don't have any source material. And the collective Star Wars, fandom rose up from furor and said, hey, all that stuff you called Legends is source material.
And it's good.
It's really, really good. And apparently she got the message, or somebody at Disney got the message.
Yeah. Well, I think Filoni, they're not talking about it, but he's got to be so behind all of these different ideas.
And he's got to be over the moon. I mean,
yeah.
and I've pointed this out before, but I'll just, and this has never been confirmed, and it's just speculation on my part, but I don't think it's unrelated that what's his name is on his way out, the CEO of Disney.
Oh, I can't think of his name either. You don't mean Iger. You mean you do mean Bob Iger. Because he's out, this happens. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. Okay.
All this stuff, because you remember he did that interview with the Star Wars show a while back.
Mm-hmm.
And his thing was saying is the next really big thing for Star Wars is going to be the next movie. And he said that was so important.
Right.
And, now we've got all of this. It seems like Disney's doubling down with the TV shows, and rightly so.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this seems like a major strategy change, and I don't think it's unrelated that Bob Iger's out the door.
Yeah. I find it very interesting that, so this movie is supposed to come out in 2023. And there's really no reason for it not to, because I mean, if there's lockdowns or anything like that, they'll just put it out on Disney Plus. Right. They really don't have to lose money on this affair. They have Patty Jenkins. Now, the two things that I find really interesting about this, one is that they say it takes place in some future era in the Star Wars galaxy. So that sounds like it's post, Rise of Skywalker.
Mm-hmm.
And one would argue there's probably not much in the way of Force users here, or at least that's not like a major thrust.
Right.
With Stackpole's, Michael Stackpole's Rogue Squadron, but X-Wing novels, the Force was also not like a major element at any point, unless Luke Skywalker was showing up more or less in those. And so I think this is a winning idea. You're literally getting past the Rise of Skywalker, and you are steering away from any kind of concerns that people might have over a character like Rey.
Right.
Where do all these Force powers come from,
Right.
So yeah, this is just an incredibly smart move, and I think it's the right movie to make. Go ahead.
And it also kind of answers some questions, because the end of Rise of Skywalker definitely left the state of the galaxy in question. In fact, it's been in that state of question ever since The Force Awakens, where basically the New Republic is dead and gone. And this would seem to imply that there's something left, they picked themselves up from the ashes, and, at least something like an organization like Rogue Squadron is still around.
Yeah. Absolutely. Once Hosnian Prime was gone, everything's up for grabs, and it'll be interesting to see. Yeah. I'm curious, more so than what Rogue Squadron is going to take shape as. I'm more interested in what villains we're going to be dealing with here. That's going to be interesting. And there's a part of me that kind of wonders if we're not going to learn more about those villains when we get into the High Republic stories, that maybe it'll be some kind of ancient continuation. I think that'd be their smartest move as far as creating. I wouldn't create a new villain. I'd create something that that has some amount of history, because that's the problem with the First Order, is that it was an out of nowhere villain that we had no reason to really understand. So I think that would be the smartest move on their part. I also think it's a very smart move, again, to concentrate on space battles, because let's be honest, the reason everybody loves Rogue One is because that third act is the best space action we've had since Return of the Jedi. So, if you want to make a whole movie on that, you've got a winner on your hands, because that's what we love. That's what so many love about Star Wars, or it's one of the many elements we love about Star Wars. Rogue Squadron, I think that this is a winner. 2023 going to be very exciting as far as that goes. Want to move on to the other announcements?
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah. So the other thing we got, of course, we know about the Book of Boba Fett. That was a surprise. We know that season 3 of The Mandalorian is going to be a thing. We kind of theorized perhaps on where that would take shape. I don't think it's not supposed to come back, I think, until 2022. But that's fine because there might be elements of the Book of Boba Fett that would play into that as far as story-wise. But now what they are billing as a spin-off show of The Mandalorian is I think it's a limited series of Star Wars Ahsoka. So much like you had said, give Rosario Dawson her own show, Rob. You're getting your dreams coming true, man.
Yeah.
So, and the suggestion is that it's about her search for, Grand Admiral Thrawn. And of course, they set that up in Mandalorian. Go ahead.
Is this a limited series? Because I hadn't heard that yet.
For some reason, I thought I had heard that it was going to be a limited series, that it wasn't a long run.
I thought that was the case with Obi-Wan and Rangers of the New Republic, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the story, or I have it pulled up on Tech Radar. Link is in the show notes if people want to look it up, but I'm not 100% sure. Some of the details on these shows we're still figuring out, to this date of recording. So,
but I mean, to say the least, like this is the one I'm most looking forward to. I don't make any bones about it that Ahsoka is one of my favorite characters.
Right.
And just the logo for the show alone says so much.
Doesn't it look like World Between Worlds?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I thought the same thing. No one's saying it, but yes, I agree with you. Mm-hmm. And that does make one wonder, because if they're going to go there,
right. Well,
what does that mean about the future of Star Wars? Go ahead.
We still don't know what happened to Ahsoka in between when she left the World Between Worlds and the end of Rebels.
Right.
Because there was a several-year period where, because Ahsoka didn't come back to help Ezra.
Right.
She was involved in something else.
Yeah, that's a great point. This is going to probably fill in a lot of interesting story gaps that we don't, and I don't know how much Filoni's going to be involved, but his rules are that no one touches Ahsoka without his say. And
so, I understand, like The Mandalorian was sort of like his test run on doing live action.
Yeah.
And basically this is his baby.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree with you. There's one other show on this list that I might be more excited for, but it's certainly not a known quantity, so I don't want to say that so strongly, but we'll talk about it when we get to it. Now, this is one of two spinoff shows that The Mandalorian is getting. The other is Rangers of the New Republic. Do you think this is going to be the Cara Dune show? I mean, what do you think, Rob?
Yeah, it kind of sounds. I mean, like they certainly sort of set it up when that X-Wing pilot left her the badge.
Right.
And apparently he's going to be part of the show too, I guess. But
I'd love to see, like, if they're going to bring in Trapper Wolf. Like, I'm fine with Filoni getting in front of the camera as much as he wants as well.
Right.
Oh man, I keep thinking about him, like, because he's such a character, in real life. Right. I feel like he is. And like all the adulation and everything going on in Star Wars right now, I just always kind of picture him, kind of like just sitting back and going, I thought it'd be good. I don't know,
Yeah. He's so coy.
He is. He's hilarious. So anyway, if he wants to be in front of this one, I'm game. I think it's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. You do have to do something to build up the New Republic more, I think, to give meaning to even what happens in the sequel trilogy. Right. So this isn't a bad idea. Like, I think this is a show you should do because you've got to give the New Republic meaning, and maybe it can deliver that.
Yeah. Well, this is part
ahead.
of that process that I was talking about for us, where some people were talking about like they need to retcon the sequel trilogy to everything. That's never going to happen, folks. The best thing we can hope for is that they're going to pick up the pieces and move on with what they've got, and this is part of that, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we talked about this in the last episode of TIE Fighter Renegades too. I mean, they really did, even with the little things they did in The Mandalorian that hinted at, say, like Snoke, with like the clones and everything.
Right.
they really pulled off where like, okay, no, you just added some color to the sequel trilogy and now I don't have so much negative connotation. So a lot of you do enough of these little things and the world can become bigger than the sequel trilogy itself. And then you can kind of accept it a little bit better.
Right.
I'll tell you, I never see the sequel trilogy getting the like renewed acceptance that the prequel trilogy has gotten as late. I just can't picture that ever happening because the sequel trilogy are just shitty movies. But they certainly, I think what happens in them can be accepted as canon as more builds around it,
Right.
Want to move on to the next?
Yeah.
All right. So go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, no.
Okay. So next show on the list, Obi-Wan. This is one we've been excited for a while. Certainly this is going to be a limited run.
Right.
But, kind of the big news that came out about this is that Hayden Christensen is going to reprise the role of Darth Vader.
Right.
Which I say, go for it, boy. Like, why not? He did don the suit, even though I think it was in stilts. He did don the suit in episode 3. I remember when they made a big deal about that. Right. I'm just glad this guy's getting work and, what the hell? And if it's going to allow for some flashback scenes, I mean, we saw him. He was at the last celebration, wasn't he, Hayden Christensen?
Yes.
He didn't look that different. Like he's kind of like a DiCaprio where I think he's kind of the ageless man. And so what the hell, if we can get some more of him as Anakin, I'm okay with that too.
Yeah. Same here.
Yeah. So this should be, what's her name? Deborah Chow.
Yeah.
Right. So,
and she directed some of the best episodes of season 1 of The Mandalorian.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, like she actually really knocked it right out of the park. So I expect great things for Obi-Wan as well. I mean, that's another really impressive thing about this announcement is that it is touching on multiple eras within Star Wars, really all of them. It seems that we're getting here. Anyway, everybody's talking about that. Well, if Hayden Christensen's coming back as Darth Vader, that means we're going to get more moments between which is something that people had speculated on over the years, that there were previous moments to A New Hope where Vader and Kenobi, met again. And looks like we might get that. We'll see. How do you feel about that, Rob? Do you think that that's kind of insulting to the moments in A New Hope, or do you think it just adds to the mythos?
It's too early to say.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm reserving judgment.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, we got to see how they execute it, but Deborah Chow's the right hands, I think, for right now.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. So the next show on the list, of course, is Cassian Andor, which you had mentioned you were very excited about in the last episode that we recorded, Rob. This, of course, is a prequel, more or less, to Rogue One. It's coming along. I'm glad it's still in production. I'm glad that they're on top of it. I think this is another one, though, that's a limited series where it's only 12 episodes.
Yeah, I think so too. In fact, they recently released like a what they call it, like a sizzle reel or something.
Correct.
A lot of it was just kind of like stuff from Rogue One, but they did show some behind the scenes, sort of like they're building the sets and whatnot. And it seems like they're pouring a lot of money into this show. So I mean, like I was excited before. And I would say like some of these new announcements I'm more excited about than Andor, but like this show I don't think is going to be anything to sneeze at.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's going to be Rebel Alliance action, which I think a lot of people really want. And so that'll work. I really can't get over because we have a logo now for the show. And I don't know, I just keep seeing Quake, Well,
that was one of the logos that we would see on some of the Rebel pilot helmets, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's another version of the, what do they call it? It's like the Phoenix, but the Starbird. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And that's fine. But it just instantly, when I saw it, I was like, what is this, Quake? What are we doing here? But it works.
Can't unsee now.
Yeah, exactly. But good times. I'm looking forward to Andor as well. I think that should be a fun show. So here's now the next one, Star Wars Visions. So let me read the description of this. This series of short films on Disney Plus will be composed of anime-style episodes made by acclaimed Japanese creators. This should result in a bunch of fresh new angles on the Star Wars universe, similar, we suppose, to The Animatrix or Halo Legends. I think their mention of The Animatrix is not unprecedented because we know we're getting The Matrix 4 this year, but I thought that was odd that they would mention it. Regardless, I'm intrigued to see what this is going to do, what this could look like. I don't think anybody can imagine what it's going to actually be. So this one's probably the biggest mystery of the bunch.
Right.
But I'll take some anime Star Wars. I'm all for that. How about you, Rob?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think of all of them, this is probably going to be the most mixed bag.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be touch and go. But if it's going to if it's more of a prestige project, which I assume that it is, we might get some really interesting themes in this. Some interesting subjects might come up. I hope it's not all, style and like that. There's actually some point to a lot of the stories, which is generally what can happen with great anime. Right. Even if people in the West can't get it, but, understand it, what's going on. The next show. So the next show, this is the one that I want to say I'm the most interested in, and that is The Acolyte. So we know that it is taking place towards the end of the High Republic era, which the first books and stories of that. Actually, the latest issue of Star Wars Insider, they've started reinserting canon short stories into it, original canon short stories.
Oh, really?
And,
that's interesting.
Yeah. So the December issue of Star Wars Insider actually has the very first fiction that takes place in the High Republic. I have the issue. I have not read it yet. That'll be some of my calendar reading, but I will get that in. So I'm intrigued, but this show appears to be about the dark side. And that's what's got me interested. I am on board with that. Right. Not only that, but it's also female centric, dark side. I'm sold. I'm really fucking sold on that notion alone. So I would, this is the one that I think I'm kind of low key the most excited about. And I don't know. I mean, Rob, what do you got for thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, it looks interesting. The name certainly seems to imply, what is it, the Acolytes of the Beyond or something?
Right. Which, are part of like the sequel trilogy mythos a bit. Chuck Wendig wrote about them. Right. Yeah. If it's going to lead towards them. And,
right. But if it's taking notes from stuff like the Lost Tribe of the Sith. Yeah. Sign me up.
Yeah, great little short story series that ended up getting collected as a whole novel, The Lost Tribe of the Sith. That was awesome. They did a comic too. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like that's the thing is that, if the Acolytes of the Beyond end up becoming sort of like this long running big bad, kind of like the Shadows in Babylon 5 or something that are always behind the scenes, I'm there. Like, I think that'd be great. Or if it has to do with the Sith Eternal, that works for me too. However that takes shape, I'm excited for this one. The next one, this is one where we probably saw the most of it, but we also knew the most about it before the announcement, that being The Bad Batch. The sizzle reel for it did show a lot of footage. We got to see some Tarkin in it, and that I was surprised because I was expecting this to take place more during the Clone Wars, but actually it's taking place like during the Empire. So
it seems like to be taking place particularly during like the transition to the Empire.
Right.
Because we
during,
don't just see Tarkin. Yeah, we don't just see Tarkin, but we see Palpatine, like giving his announcement about the formation of the Empire.
Yeah. So this show just when initially I was like, it got instantly more interesting as soon as I saw that sizzle reel. Like as soon as I saw Tarkin being involved and the era that it was really going to take place in, I'm like, okay, this isn't just going to be some kind of like A-Team ripoff or comedy. This is going to deal in an era and have characters in it that I'm really passionate about. Yeah. So very excited about this one. When before I could have took or leave it, I really didn't care.
Because those Bad Batch episodes they did during the last season of the Clone Wars weren't exactly my favorite episodes of that season. Right. But yeah, they could turn this around and turn it into something really cool. Yeah,
I mean, also in that sizzle reel, Fennec was in it. Ming Na's character.
Yeah.
She showed up a couple times.
Right.
And I'm dying to learn more about that character. Actually, this is something that I felt like. Yeah. All right, real quick. Season 2 Mandalorian. When she like opens up her stomach and shows that she's like part droid, I guess. I really need to know more about that. Like that.
Yeah, that was weird.
That just didn't work for me. I'm like, well, wait, like you don't have a stomach. Do you eat? Like, I was kind of lost. Yeah, it seemed sort of throwaway. I don't know. Yeah. So, well, anyway, maybe we'll find out more, but it'll be good to get more background on that character as well in this. So that certainly looks exciting. Even though, again, like I said before, I didn't think so at all. So the Lando show, this is one we also kind of knew about ahead of time. I think that there's still debate whether or not Donald Glover is reprising his role, even though the footage they were showing was all of him. I know this is getting made by the writer behind Dear White People, which was on Netflix. Admittedly, so I'm familiar with that show. I've watched it. I kind of feel like initially I was worried this was going to be a show about the Battle of Tanab. And as we've said before, I really never need to see that. I kind of feel like that's not what this is going to be about, but I might be surprised. I don't know. We know this one is going to be a mini series. They're calling it an event series. Any thoughts for this one, Rob?
At first, this was like the one I was least excited about.
Uh-huh.
But then somebody made a suggestion that, like, if they did this, it would be really cool if they actually not only brought in Donald Glover, but they brought in Billy D. Williams and sort of did like the Young Adventures of Indiana Jones.
Oh, the Indiana Jones Chronicles, right?
Yeah, where the older Lando is telling his stories about the past.
Yeah.
That would be really cool.
Yep, I'd be good for that. Absolutely. And I think a lot of people are kind of wondering, hey, are we going to get Alden Ehrenreich back as Han Solo? If they do it, whatever, it's fine. Like, he exists. It's a thing. Why not use him? How about you, Rob?
I'm still, speaking of deepfakes, I'm still waiting for somebody to put together a fan cut of somebody deepfaking not only Harrison Ford's face into all of Solo, but his voice too.
Oh yeah. That would be fun.
It's gonna happen someday.
Yeah. I think you're right. Yeah. Well, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
But yeah, same. I could, based on what you were saying, like, that could be really cool if they did bring in Billy D. Williams in some fashion. I'd certainly be more excited.
Yeah, that would sell the show for me, basically, to be perfectly honest with you. Because, I didn't object to Donald Glover's performance in Solo. It wasn't exactly, nothing about that movie was my favorite thing, except for maybe the villain.
Oh yeah. Good point. Yeah. No, I'm with you.
If they brought her back, then that'd be cool.
Right. Yeah. So mine is getting the Khaleesi back. No.
Oh no, I was talking about the rebel character. What's her name? The one with the mask.
With the mask.
Remember that stole the shipment that they were trying to hijack?
Oh, yeah. Oh, shit. Yeah, I know. For some reason, I was going to say rooster, but that's not it. I know what you mean. I know what you're talking about. Shit. Let me look it up. I'm going to edit this. Let me look it up. Oh, no, I know it. I know it before I even typed it. Enfys Nest.
Enfys Nest, yes. Yeah, I like Enfys Nest, yes.
Yeah, okay. So okay, yeah, if it's going to include some of that action, yeah, that's cool. All right, I'm with you there. I thought maybe you meant, what was it, Kira? Was that her name that they went with?
Yeah, no, I could take or leave her too.
Sure.
I still think we probably deserve something with her and Darth Maul at some point.
Yeah. Even if it were animated, I'd be down with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, let's shift in then to the movie announcements. Of course, we already talked about Rogue Squadron. That is going to be the next film in 2023. But speaking of animated, we are getting a movie called A Droid Story that is being done by ILM and Lucasfilm Animation. It will feature R2-D2 and C-3PO along with some other new hero, and that's really all that we know. If Mongo Baobab shows up, sure, let's do it. If they want to just rehash the Droids cartoon, that's fine. It's just a weird announcement. I don't know what the hell they're going to do. I don't know what it's about, but
there's kinds of things to do. I was just thinking the other day how, we still don't even really know where C-3PO came from because Anakin basically just rebuilt him.
Oh, that's interesting. See, I always took it as that he built him from scratch.
No, because he already had a personality and everything. Like,
Hmm.
because maybe I'm wrong, but like the way I understand the droids in the Star Wars universe function is they don't start developing a personality until they've like been in service for a little while.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. I agree with you on that. That's very interesting. I mean, if anything, the history of R2D2 needs to be known better. I mean, we know
Right.
he was in service for Naboo,
Right.
but that's about all we know. Yeah, I mean, as long as we don't really end up with, force powered droids, but okay.
Yeah. The less
That's fine.
said about that, the better.
Yeah. So anyway, that's a mystery. We'll find out what that show ends up being, but it will probably be a pretty interesting technical experiment as far as what the animation is going to look like. So I'm intrigued for that most of all. Then the last announcement we've got is, of course, Taika Waititi's Star Wars movie that is in production. I don't think we know much of anything about that. He did great work with The Mandalorian. Yeah. So I'm confident that this is going to be something really interesting. He's one of those guys that I look at, even though I know he's known more for his comedy. I'm pretty sure he's a hardcore fan. Because he's just too much of a dork. And I say that in a good way.
Right.
So yeah, I'm excited for whatever he's got planned. I think that should be interesting. But that's one we already knew about. But right. That wraps, or go ahead.
Well, they did show off a kind of a logo for the movie, and it had like shades of Ben-Hur.
Interesting.
The way, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's basically.
I think I might have missed that.
It has the Star Wars logo, and it looks like it's cut out of stone, and it looks like the title poster for the Ben-Hur.
Wow. Well, I'd be game for that. I mean, if they want to make a pod racing film, I'm not opposed, because that's really what the whole pod racing scene copied.
Right. Yeah.
Was basically the chariot race in Ben-Hur.
Right.
Which one of the greatest movies ever made. So why not copy it? But wow. Okay. Well, we will certainly be that one just got a little more interesting based on what you had just shared. Yeah, but that's our wrap up. I mean, I assume you also feel good about the Taika Waititi film overall.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really know much about it at this point, so there's not much to talk about other than the director himself and what I just mentioned with the logo. But yeah, I'm really interested to find out what time period it's going to be in. I mean, that seems to be like the big thing with a lot of these projects is when they're taking place. And we do have, the Rogue Squadron movie that seems to be moving things forward. Right. I actually kind of hope that, Taika does do a movie in that same time forward or even further forward, like way in the future.
Well, what if, so you just go ahead.
I'm just saying that I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah. So you just shared that logo with me, and I'm looking at it now. I mean, what if, and there's things that are interesting that weren't discussed here, and we need to talk about those for a minute too. But there is Kathleen Kennedy said we're going to do something Knights of the Old Republic. Now I look at the Star Wars logo and it kind of says ancient to me, and so I wonder if this is going to be that Knights of the Old Republic thing, because that was not talked about during this whole announcement. And it's not like they didn't retrace announcements that were already made. They did. So why leave that one out? I think that's kind of an odd omission.
Right.
So I don't know. Yeah. Either far past or far future. I'm good with both. I'm
same
with
here.
You there. Yeah. The other thing, in fact, when we were off air, you brought this up, and I thought this was actually a really a brilliant thing for you to mention. There was no discussion whatsoever of the Ryan Johnson trilogy that everybody was so fucking hot about. No mention whatsoever of the Ryan Johnson trilogy, and this would have been the perfect moment to mention that, but they completely overstepped it. Didn't bring it up at all. Yeah. What are your thoughts about this, Rob?
I mean, we've been told about what how this trilogy of Rian Johnson's was supposed to, like, vindicate his vision of Star Wars and how great
Right.
The Last Jedi is and what horrible people we are for not liking it. I've even been told that, like the version of Star Wars that we're getting now with The Mandalorian doesn't exist to avenge the version of Star Wars that we don't like in the sequel trilogy. But, it doesn't really need avenging because where is it?
Right.
Where is the Rian Johnson trilogy? I don't hear about it. I don't see it.
Yeah. I mean, this whole announcement completely sidestepped the sequel trilogy. There is no talk of anything related. There are no characters involved. I mean, there's tons of characters from The Mandalorian getting their own damn shows. There's not a stitch of that here. Yeah. So, right. Yeah. Like what needs to be avenged? It's already dead.
And interestingly enough, I mean, when Disney took over Star Wars, it seemed initially that the prequels were, the redheaded stepchild of the franchise.
Right.
And Disney would not talk about them and would not, do anything that connected to the Clone Wars or to the prequel trilogy. And now it seems very much that the sequel trilogy is getting the same treatment.
Yeah, and the prequel trilogy is not so much getting ignored.
No, not at all.
We're getting Ewan McGregor. We're getting, a direct sequel to Clone Wars. I mean, a very direct sequel, even more so than Rebels. And all of that is getting connected to The Mandalorian. I mean, so it would seem that Disney considers their two successful aspects of Star Wars, minus the original trilogy, is the prequels and The Mandalorian. That's Star Wars success, according to these announcements. And of course, they're banking on the High Republic, which that remains to be seen. But I'm cautiously optimistic about it.
Which is closer to the prequels than anything else in the franchise right now. That's canon.
Precisely. Yes. Yeah. And there are no expectations. I don't need to see Luke Skywalker in the High Republic. Obviously, it wouldn't even make sense. As to where that's a major part of what fucked up in the sequel trilogy. So. Yeah, I mean, all of this gives me, I get the nice warm fuzzies about Star Wars, frankly. Like I'm, and it's remarkable because, if you asked me, like, I don't know, just a few months ago, or should I say about a year ago, like, do I think I could have been this excited about Star Wars again? I would have told you, not a chance. Like nothing could make me this excited about Star Wars again. But with all of this, oh no. I mean, I'm white hot as far as Star Wars goes.
Do you think this would have hit as well without the season finale of The Mandalorian?
I mean, it again, it got announced beforehand.
Right, but shortly before,
just shortly,
just shortly before, like like I said, like my description initially was this was a barrage of Star Wars news, and my initial feeling when I heard all these announcements was kind of excited, but at the same time a little like trepidatious, like is this too much? Mm-hmm. And then Star Wars made me feel like I was 6 years old again.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I would not have been as excited if it wasn't for that season finale of The Mandalorian, because I mean, well, we said it earlier. They fixed Star Wars. Like in 10 minutes, they literally fixed Star Wars, like just like that. And so now everything that gets announced about Star Wars, there's excitement instead of begrudgment again. And yeah, so I think you're totally right about that. And it's interesting to note, I mean, because again, they announced a bunch of Marvel stuff at this time as well. Yeah. And a lot of it. And I think that more people were talking about all the Marvel things initially. And then, that Mandalorian finale dropped. And then everybody was just talking about, and holy shit, we're going to get more.
Well, it wasn't just Marvel and Star Wars too, either. I mean, there's some other things of note here, like Indiana Jones and Willow and.
Yeah. The Willow series. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
that's Lucasfilm. Yeah.
Right. But I mean, when's the last time anybody talked about that at all?
Yeah. Yeah. Boy, yeah. Well, as that gets closer, that's something I want to talk about. The Willow TV series. We don't have to do it now, but when we get some more details, I'm curious because I mean, a lot of people don't know that movie had sequel books,
right?
and they were very good. Like they were actually, in fact, I'd argue they were great. So, I have thoughts about this.
Yeah, they were books that George Lucas co-wrote too, weren't they?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
They were. So, that's something worth discussing, and we will on TIE Fighter Renegades in the future, especially, because it is like it's talk about a bastard stepchild in Lucasfilm. Willow is one of those. Between that and Howard the Duck. And
I was just going to say that. You took the words right out of my mouth.
Which we won't talk about Howard the Duck right now, but anyway, so, well, anyway, that's going to be interesting too. It really was a barrage. And again, even just with the Star Wars stuff alone, who cares about Netflix? Who cares about HBO Max? Who cares about, like Disney just took it over. Now they have to deliver on all this, some of this stuff is still in very early production. They still have to deliver, but we know they can deliver if they want to. And that's what, like you said, that's what the finale of Mandalorian, really, really drove home.
Right.
So
they gave us the possibility of having,
they gave
all
us confidence.
Stuff. Yes. Yeah. And so, I undoubtedly this was all done, in a calculated way on purpose. And, got to give it to them. They're very shrewd.
Yeah, no, this was tremendous showmanship and strategy on their part. And I'm amazed they had Kathleen Kennedy doing the announcing. If Dave Filoni was up there doing the announcement, I think it would have even went bigger. But
yeah, and
that's fine.
I don't care either way, but this does further cement the fact that, guys, Kathleen Kennedy's not going anywhere.
Right.
Get over it.
Yeah. And if behind the scenes, like Filoni's behind half these shows anyway, who cares?
Yeah. Right.
It'll be fine.
And like I said, I think the real villain of the Star Wars, Disney Star Wars, the whole time really has been Bob Iger, and he's on his way out the door. And I think I'll say it again. I don't think it's a coincidence that all this stuff is happening at the same time.
Yeah. And speaking of, we've talked about how Filoni has been groomed to take over Star Wars, or has been, being even more groomed. A part of me wonders if Jon Favreau is being groomed to take over Disney at some point, because he's been spearheading, like with Lion King, and his tremendous work. And really, I'll give credit where it's due. His tremendous work with Marvel, with Iron Man and so on. He's like the only guy that has his finger in every single pie at Disney. And that gets it and has the talent. Like I could see that. I could see 5, 10 years from now that he's basically in Bob Iger's position. And that's only, in my opinion, that's a good thing, because Favreau has respect for the greats.
If he wants it.
Yeah.
If he wants it. I kind of have my doubts as whether or not he would want to be operating at that level.
Yeah, it depends. I can't wait for a lot more making specials around the Mandalorian, because I want to see what his like real position looked like. I know we've had some, but I want to see like really nitty gritty stuff. Yeah. But because he's really, and you can tell from interviews that he's done, he's really interested, much like George Lucas, in forwarding technologies in movie making.
Right. And that's why I have a hard time seeing him in a Bob Iger position, is because he wants to be involved directly in the creative process. He wants to be creating, he wants to be there forwarding the technology and be involved in the storytelling. And I don't know that it's kind of like promoting, Captain Kirk to Admiral. That was a mistake.
Oh yeah. That's a good analogy. Yeah. It's like, sorry, Jon Favreau, your first best destiny is to be behind the camera, not the desk.
Right.
Yeah. I could hear that. Well, I wonder. Admittedly, if there was any guy I'd want running all of these disparate universes, it'd be him. Like let Feige run Marvel, let Filoni run Star Wars, and so on. And then above him is him.
I just wish we could get Hollywood back to the day where the business people ran the business and the creative people did the creative stuff. And they didn't really, get in each other's way as much.
Right. You didn't have bean counters getting involved. I hear that. It's, the thing is that you have to, and actually maybe the Mandalorian opened this door up, because in my opinion, what happened is that when A New Hope came out, when Star Wars came out in 1977, it was, I mean, again, they only gave him like $9 to $10 million. That's all they gave George Lucas to make it. That's chump change.
Right.
But he ended up making, the percentage returns on that were astronomical, and nobody expected that. And once it happened, basically the business guys were just like, what do we have for science fiction?
Right.
And you can see this parallel running of history in the, in the creation of like Star Trek Phase 2 and what would eventually be the motion picture. And so basically for like, I feel like for about 15 or 20 years or so, Hollywood was just trying to recreate that astronomical ROI that Fox got with Star Wars.
Well, I mean, it definitely changed the industry. And I've said this before, that Star Wars, the original Star Wars, the first movie, could have only been made at the time it was, when the old studio system had basically collapsed.
Right.
And creative people were given free reign. People, like Francis Ford Coppola, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the director of The Godfather, and Scorsese.
Like Scorsese.
Yeah, Scorsese.
Yeah, sure.
Like all those guys. Yeah, and that's the thing is, this is like when the bean counters saw the fruits of those people's labor, then that's when like the industry changed again and they started getting involved. But we need to get back to that time before, and that brilliant period of creative outburst where the artists were given free reign to make the movies they want.
Yeah, see that's the thing, and that's why actually I think The Mandalorian might be it, because basically the studios didn't understand, the business people didn't understand Star Wars. Like they didn't realize what they had on their hands.
Right.
And when it popped, they had a moment of self-realization, I think, where they said, okay, we don't understand, but people seem to love this shit, so let's just throw money, at any wacky idea. I mean, and that's why we got 20 years of the greatest movies ever made, because like the studios, the business people didn't need to understand. They didn't want to understand. They were just throwing risky money around.
Right.
And we need that. And that's kind of what we're saying here, is that we need to do that again. And I don't think they expected The Mandalorian to be as big as it was. And now they're like, well, wait a minute. These guys understand, and everybody's talking about this. Let's just throw dumb money around. And we want that. We want the dumb money to get thrown around again, and just let people make the movie, make the crazy shit they want to make. So yeah. Did you have more up?
No, I'm just going on that same point. It's just like, it's unfortunate. Like there needs to be like there feels like there was an unwritten agreement that, the creative people know what they're doing, or and the people with the money know how to exploit it. Like there has to be that agreement that yes, the creative people are being exploited for their talents to a certain degree. We give you what you want and we get what we want, Right. And that message is somewhere has become mixed up, and wires got crossed, and every exec thinks they're creative and every creative thinks they're an exec.
Yeah. Well, and I know we have other things we want to get into, but like this might, ironically, I kind of feel like this might bolster the idea that Favreau would actually become head of Disney. Just in that, I wonder if what he's doing is he is trying to make technologies that make that offset the budgetary concerns, meaning that he's making the technologies that will let the creators be ridiculously creative at an exceptionally low cost, that the shareholders, the investors, and whoever else in the foreign money, will say, okay, no, we can take that risk. And it becomes possible to do that again, because those risks are what build out these universes, that ultimately later make an ass ton of money.
It's interesting on another level with the technology thing, and Favreau is like, he's bringing back, like we were talking about with the model making and stuff, and the motion control and stuff like that. there was another revolution that happened back in the 90s with Jurassic Park.
Right.
And once the Hollywood got the CGI bug, everything had to be CGI, whether or not it was cost effective or not.
Right.
And I think this really brings home the point that CGI has its place, but if practical effects and model work are what the job calls for, and it is because it isn't always the CGI isn't always the cheapest option.
Right.
It's really expensive.
Right.
So if you can do it better and you can do it cheaper with practical effects and model work, then do it. Don't abandon the old technology just because it's old.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and that says so much, because I feel like Favreau is basically like he's rebuilding the entire Hollywood economy to where like you have multiple different types of businesses that could exist. Because I mean, model makers or like even, I don't know, stop motion photography, like lots of things just died the day Jurassic Park came out. I mean, they were offed.
Yeah, I mean, they started dying. I mean, it's almost kind of like with the print industry is going through now.
Right.
And has been for the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's still there are still magazines that get printed. There's still newspapers around, but it's a dying breed. I mean, it's worth pointing out that Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, had more model work than actually any movie of its time.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope that this is happening, that the shift is coming back to where either the dumb money can come in again, and fund the really creative projects and, like not the dumb money, but the risky money, and they'll be less risk averse. I mean, if you look at Marvel, it does not appear that that's happening, but with Star Wars, maybe it is, because some of these shows that we talked about that are coming, like Visions and so on, I mean, like these are risky projects, or at least they sound like it.
Yeah. And they definitely seem kind of like, in a ways, a little bit off the cuff.
Yeah. 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 I hope it's happening. I really hope it's happening because, in fact, I was having a conversation the other day. I mean, a lot of people don't realize, some people like look at European cinema and they're always like, and people that are into European cinema are really passionate about it because there's a lot of weird films that get made over there, like wild, strange films that just don't make any damn sense, or even movies that may not have landed so well in America, say like even like a Highlander or something like that, are huge over there because they just love these weird ass films. And a lot of weird films were I don't think people realize that in Europe, especially for a good chunk of the 20th century, most of the cinema there was state funded. Like right. it was countries, all kind of like Italy and Britain and, sure they weren't, or Spain, they weren't fighting the 100 Years' War anymore, but they were fighting a culture war with their entertainment. Mm-hmm. And the state was literally funding all of this. I mean, and this is true in, I mean, this isn't just Britain, it's most European countries. And so you got to get these wacky ass films because the state doesn't fucking care where the money comes from. They're just going to take more of your taxes. Like it doesn't matter to them. They're not expecting an ROI. They were just trying to outperform each other. But I don't want things to go that way to where the state's got to fucking fund these films. I mean, in many ways it kind of already does with, cuts that you get in military hardware.
Right.
But regardless, I really I hope Favreau is, with his technological advances, like the tank that we're using, the Mandalorian and so on, that it does get things to where they can be more cost effective and risky money can really re-enter the fold. And so, yeah, I mean, the more we talk about it, the more I feel like the Mandalorian really might be a very real Trojan horse for creative film and TV to come back, because it hasn't been around for a while.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, you want to shift gears, Rob?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been running another long one here. Rob and I were looking at the show notes earlier, and we're just like, oh yeah, this maybe the show will go about an hour or so, and no.
Yeah. I was kind of shaking my head at that when you mentioned that too. I'm like, sure.
Yeah, right. I say that every time. Well, anyway, we'll shift a little bit away from Star Wars here, even though it's still relevant. Because really this has to ultimately do with streaming overall. And of course, much of what we were talking about is Disney Plus, which is a streaming platform. But And this is something, if you follow me on Twitter, I got pretty hot and bothered about this openly. But in and we don't have to get too much into the politics around it, or at least the overarching politics of it, but I think it's worthwhile to bring up. In the COVID-19 relief bill, which the more we learn about it, basically does not seem to be relief for much of anything other than the powers that be. There was a provision, shall we say, for basically if you are, and a lot of people misunderstood what was being said here. I put a link in the show notes about this, but if you are offering what would be called a pirate streaming service or an illegal streaming service that was for profit. Now, how you get classified as for profit is, I don't know. Like, is it because you have ads on your site? Does that make you for profit? Like, it's a very, because I don't know anybody that really pays for this sort of thing, like that actually pays with their credit card. So that's kind of dubious what exactly that means, for profit. But basically, if you are running a for profit pirate streaming service, you could see 10 years in prison. What that has to do with COVID-19, I have no idea. And everybody, and many people rightfully so, said, wait, what does this have to do with COVID-19 relief? That's horseshit. I mean, we can very clearly say at the onset, when you have a bill that's named COVID-19 relief, you probably want to toss everything you can into those 5,000 pages, because it's a good bet that it'll get passed just because, right, on the name alone. Okay.
And that even seems to be questioned right now. So, I mean,
yes. Right. So
they can't even give the plebs their $600.
Yeah. Right. Oh, do we give them $2,000? Do we give them whatever? It's like, oh, it doesn't matter. What do we give the billionaires? All right. No, anyway. Yeah, exactly. Mind blowing. So this is in there. I can't help but feel that this is coming from the lobbyists, from the entertainment industry, and somehow they are feeling some very real squeeze from the fact that people are not putting up the 10 to 15, or shall we say the $5 to $15 per month for all of these different streaming services, and so they're trying to shut them down, and that's real. That's what this is all about. I do think it points that like people are kind of fed up with the amount of streaming services that they have to subscribe to, that it's antithetical to what people originally thought streaming services were going to offer them, that they could get away from the $150 to $200 cable bills that they had been paying. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that I predicted would happen on Sovryn Tech for years. It's not necessarily new perhaps to this audience, but I wanted to bring it up that, yeah, I mean, I don't want to pay for any of these streaming services either. I also don't use any pirate streaming services whatsoever. But it doesn't appear, I think a lot of people were getting confused that they thought that this meant that if you were torrenting episodes or downloading episodes of something, whatever, that you were going to get 10 years in prison. That doesn't seem to be the case.
No.
Here, but I don't know. I mean, when you saw it, go ahead, Rob. What do you got?
They're going after the popcorn times and
right,
other services like that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, these aren't things that I ever really used. When I'll say it, when I torrent, I torrent old school, and I download the whole episode and I keep the damn file, and I don't mind saying I keep the damn file. In fact, you know what? And Rob, if you want me to edit it, I will, but I'll just say it here. I'm going to torrent Wonder Woman 84 and I'm going to watch it, and
yeah. You know what? I mean, I'll be perfectly honest with you too. Like I'm glad that the makers of Legendary Entertainment is fighting against AT&T and HBO Max to get their movie in theaters. But at the same time, I'm kind of sad that I won't be able to pirate it as soon as I wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm just like, come at me, like, go ahead.
Yeah.
Because at the end, go ahead.
I mean, the thing that always really gets me about all these different, and we hear it over and over again every time piracy is in the news. They throw out some ridiculous figure like this costs us $30 billion a year, and you know what? I'm sorry, that's $30 billion that doesn't exist in the fucking economy.
Yeah. 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 Well said.
I mean, I don't know where you thought that was coming from, but it doesn't exist. The reason people are pirating things for a lot of times is not just because they don't want to be subscribing to all these different services. They can't goddamn afford it.
Yeah, you raise a great point, because this is just such tremendous hubris on the point of these, or on the side of these of the studios, where they think they are so fucking important that the only alternative to these pirate streaming services is that people would pay for theirs. No, like there's no guarantee that people would fucking pay for your shit if they couldn't pirate it. That's nonsense. Like there's no guarantees of that. And to lay out that $30 billion yearly, because that's what they said, is that these pirate streaming services are costing the entertainment industry $30 billion yearly. That is not guaranteed money at all. And like you said, that's not money that's actually in the economy. What are they talking about? They're fake numbers, or speculative numbers at that. And you're going to throw people in 10 years in prison for that? I mean, and that, that's the part that really rubs me about this. And any time, like, with Napster, go down the fucking list of any of these people. Like, I want to, we're doing a show here. We're doing a podcast about Star Wars. There are still plenty of people. It's not the same as it was in the 90s. In the 90s, there would have been a lot more, but there are still plenty of people who today would say, you do an entire podcast about Star Wars and science fiction. It's just a fucking movie. It's just a TV show. It's just this. And I hear where they're coming from. And at the end of the day, most of the time they're not wrong. But then let's take that all the way. How about you go in front of the judge and say, Your Honor, they're just fucking movies. What are you doing throwing people behind bars next to murderers and whatever else, like they're just movies. And okay, fine. There's somebody's livelihood and they make money off of it and all this stuff. Yeah. Okay. But at the end of the day, really, they're, let's just call it, it's just entertainment. It's just art. And you're literally going to toss people in prison over these sorts of things. That just drives me nuts. It's like, oh, the kid's listening to a song. Oh boy, criminal, like, come on.
Yeah. I mean, if you really want to talk about the poor artists, and how you're taking food off of their plates, why don't you look at the studio execs for that? Because they're already they're the people that have been exploiting the passion of artists and creative types for generations and underpaying them. So you know what? When you start paying creatives what they're worth, right. And I'm not talking just about the director and the actors. I'm talking about all, like, when you go and you look at the credits and you see all of those names, those are the people I'm talking about. When you pay them a living wage, then we can talk about how we're taking money out of their mouths and off their plates with a little bit of piracy.
Right. I mean, sure, go after the pirate streaming services after you've paid Alan Dean Foster.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely. Yes.
Like Disney, go ahead and pay ADF, and then we can talk about, maybe where you're losing money. But like the people that actually created your shit aren't getting paid. I mean, the incentives are totally off on this. I mean, fortunately, I don't think there's anybody who's defending this. Like, not really, or at least not anybody that's outside of the industry anyway. That was defending this whole thing. It's unbelievable, and I don't know if it's going to actually end up passing or not. But I can't fathom it. And really, I think where they lose the most money. You want to talk about money that's actually in the economy and that probably does end up being, close to $30 billion a year for the entire entertainment industry, is all the money they waste on anti-piracy or on digital rights management that doesn't thwart anybody, that doesn't stop anybody from, from streaming or copying their stuff. I know they spend at least millions of dollars on that. If you're worried about your pocketbook, then cut that out, because it's not stopping anything. That's why you're trying to pass this shit through a relief bill. So none of this makes sense. I mean, got any other thoughts on it, Rob?
No, I've said my piece.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the only criminals here are the fucking studios.
Yeah, well, and the politicians.
And the politicians. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, unbelievable. We'll see if this ends up actually getting passed. I will be intrigued to learn if it does. But just stupid. So how about, Rob, how about we talk about some things that aren't stupid, some things that are actually pretty damn cool. And we'll get into our picks of the episode. We didn't get into them in our last episode, but we've got a couple of doozies to make up for it here. Let me assure you of that. You want to start off, Rob, or you want me to start?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. So
Sure.
for my pick, we've kind of got a sequel from a pick from a year or two ago, I think it was, and that we had the YouTube channel Star Wars Theory came up with a short, a fan film called Vader. And this is basically a trailer or a cinematic of sorts of Vader Episode 2. And we get some awesome Mace Windu action where he, well, let's just say that if you were ever a fan of the Republic Commando games, you're going to love the heck out of this little the trailer or cinematic. It does appear to be mostly CGI. It remains to be seen whether or not we're going to get a live action version of this. But it already looks the production quality just on this alone looks fantastic. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the whole thing when it does eventually arrive on our doorstep.
Yeah, so it's like about 3 minutes. And certainly if you watched the Vader Episode 1, I think they called it Shards of the Past. If you watch that, which we reviewed, and I mean, I thought was very well done. That was mainly like actors, like that was live action. And it ends off in and this was the only real critique I had of it, is that you could tell the building that they were in at the end of that was a funeral home, basically.
More like a mausoleum.
Yeah, it was a mausoleum. That's exactly what it was. But it worked. Like I was like, but that kind of works. Like that looks like Naboo or something.
Yeah, because Naboo had very much like the vaulted ceilings and a marble and the kind of stuff.
Yeah, and a Renaissance look.
Right.
Yeah, so this picks up, kind of right along with that. And yeah, you have a bunch of CGI clone troopers and so on, and and then Mace Windu shows up, and I agree with you. It works. It looks good, and even if it stays as CGI and doesn't bother going into more live action or fleshing out to that point, again, there's a release date of to be decided. It's TBD or TBA. I'd be fine with it. I thought it was really cool and just a lot of fun to watch. And well, again, we talked about it earlier. People were wondering if they're going to bring Mace Windu back. We know that Samuel L. Jackson is totally for it. Of course, why wouldn't he be? And I'm not opposed to the idea in and of itself either. I thought he was a great character in the prequels. A lot of people think he's sort of monotonous, or kind of one note. But I thought he was cool, especially in Clone Wars. He's like downright funny a lot of times. What do you got?
He's still the worst Jedi ever, but I mean,
well, he's all right. He is the Worf of Star Wars, right? Where he's just kind of always wrong.
Yeah, he's the micro brain of Star Wars.
With the macro head. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just like Worf is always like, all right, should we shoot it, sir? And Picard just has to look at him. Why would we shoot at it? Yeah, fair enough. So, but it's cool. It works. I really like this. And yeah, I appreciate Star Wars Theory's work on the matter. If anything, he's at least showing, you could make the argument that he's showing Disney this is something that people want because of the large reaction that he gets, because he does have a very large audience. Yeah. And so I applaud that in and of itself. Yeah.
I will say, like, he's one of the few Star Wars, YouTubers out there left that I still have any amount of respect for. The rest of them, for the most part, can, fucking take a long walk off a short, skiff.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm totally, I'll name names. And yeah, we've talked very kindly about Star Wars Theory in the past. I thought his rant about how horrible, the sequel trilogy is, any fan could have written something better, and that it's basically fan fiction, I thought was right on point. But I mean, and I've talked about these guys as well in the past, but I'm just fed up with them. Like Midnight's Edge, Doomcock, these idiots. I'm never watching another video by these people. Fuck them. Like the way these are the kind of people who they just, even with as great as everything we've talked about has been so far with Star Wars, with the Mandalorian and so on, these people just can't let go. They have to fucking complain still. And, when you get a good thing in your life, baby, don't complain about it, because that's your, I don't know, that's how you make your money, by just complaining about everything.
Right. Well, I mean, it's part of a toxic environment too, because yes. I mean, hate drives views on YouTube,
Yeah. Extremes drive
so
YouTube.
So they're just playing the fiddles of the algorithm, which is kind of like a sad existence, in my opinion. That your life is dictated by some, unknown computer algorithm. That's pretty pathetic.
Yeah, I agree. And because as much as, and again, I've agreed with Star Wars Theories, with his critiques. I remember Sam Witwer had said on Twitter, and now he was critiquing some guys that I actually think do pretty good work, that being Red Letter Media. But he was critiquing them, saying, instead of tearing stuff down, why don't you build something? Credit to Star Wars Theory. Instead of just tearing stuff down, he's actually building shit, because this trailer was awesome. Yeah. Vader Episode 1 was awesome. And so, here's a guy living up to that. And I can see where Sam Witwer is coming from on that. And I'm never going to argue with Sam Witwer anyway. So we'll leave it there. I mean,
and credit to Star Wars Theory too, is he's always been, very, he presents his views in a even fashion where he doesn't hate people who like the sequel trilogy. He's made very reconciliatory videos about, hey, you know what? We're all Star Wars fans. We have this passion for this universe. I just happen to not like this part of it, and here's the reasons why. Right. And I think that's really just kind of like a very level-headed and good way to go about it. And like I said, he's the only one that's not playing to the YouTube hate algorithm, and I applaud him for that.
Yep. No, I agree. I agree with you completely on that. So nice work on his part with this one, and a great pick, Rob. I love it. I mean, just very cool. And that callback to
Republic Commando.
Yeah, Republic Commandos. I love that. That game was very short, but man, it was fun for what it was. I loved it. So nice touch. Well, unless you got anything else, I'll go into my pick.
Go for it.
And I'll pull it out here, even though we don't share the video of what Rob and I do, or at least usually we don't. Though, of course, we are on YouTube. You can go to tiefighter.xyz, and if you want to follow us there, that is one avenue that this is all available, especially if for some reason you don't like listening to me for 2 hours every week doing Sovryn Tech, which I don't blame you. So, but anyway, this is a book that just came out this year, and it is Flash Gordon, the Official Story of the Film by John Walsh. This is a massive tome. I mean, not like a high page count by any means. It's about 200 pages, but it's a coffee table book. I mean, it's a big one. My love of Flash Gordon is that the film from 1980 is not unknown to listeners of this show. I've talked about it and brought it up many times. I consider it, and I know I piss people off when I say this, I consider it a better movie than Star Wars: A New Hope, but we'll run with it.
Well, I mean, it's apropos because I mean, it was the movie that George Lucas wanted to make before Star Wars.
Correct. Yeah. And this book, so this book covers the production of that entire film. It gives a lot of stories about Dino De Laurentiis. The director was heavily involved with the book. They do talk to Sam Jones about it. I mean, that was a troubled production to the point where Sam Jones, who played, who played Flash Gordon in it, he walked off set, and it created major bad blood. I mean, there's amazing stories that happened around this movie. And there's like whole alternate endings that I had no idea even existed. And there's full footage from it, and like there's stills and everything, and it's all in this book. The concept artwork that's in this book is tremendous. It is an amazing 200 pages, a very uncensored look. Like there's no studio involved with this whatsoever. This is just a straight up uncensored look at what's the nitty gritty behind that movie. How did it get made? There's guys who have collected tons of the props that were getting thrown out for it, where they own all the weapons from the film. I mean, one thing nobody disagrees with about the movie Flash Gordon is that it has a very unique look, like many Dino movies do. It has there's nothing else that looks like it, all the stylings and everything. And when you read about it, and as well as some of like the deleted scenes that don't exist anymore, there's some really, really interesting scenes that had like with Princess Allura and so on that I had no idea about. And I'm a huge fan of this movie. So even if you think you know everything about Flash Gordon, I guarantee you there is a ton in this book to glean and pick up, and that you probably did not know about. Brian Blessed even talks about like what the sequels were planned, what they planned for those, which like the second movie was going to be on Mars. I mean, like really, really interesting stuff. So I can't recommend this book enough. It's perfect. If you're into the movie, you're really in for a treat, even though it does cost about $50. It's worth the shot.
Yeah, it's a beautiful book from what Brian has showed me. It's really nice.
Yeah. I mean, gorgeous. I mean, very well produced book, not cheap at all. It's not like one of those black and white jobbers that some series get or some movies will get later on by a fan, which I'm not disrespecting those. I think they're great books. But this is one that's really, really professionally done, very worthwhile. So it's a Flash Gordon, the official story of the film by John Walsh. So anyway, there's our picks. We've been going for probably almost 3 hours here. So I don't think we need to add anything else in for now. We know we got a lot of great Star Wars coming up. 2021 is still going to be an incredibly interesting year, just with the releases that are going to, that Warner Brothers is going to, be having drop. There's a lot coming up. Amazingly, when you thought that production had basically halted on so much, really, there's just a lot of stuff that got stalled that's just been in a holding pattern waiting to come out. And we're going to be covering a lot of that going into 2021, because this is the last episode of TIE Fighter Renegades for 2020. And Rob, you got any expectations for 2021? About the entertainment industry overall? Any thoughts like that?
I unfortunately, I think it's going to be more of like a return to what we're used to, unless what we had talked about before with the Mandalorian really shaking things up. It's going to be the same old game in Hollywood again, for the most part. I think maybe looking down another 2 or 3 years or even 5 years, things might get interesting. But for right now, I think we're kind of like in a transition phase, and it's Hollywood basically going to be trying to get back to their old shenanigans.
Yeah. I think we're definitely in a figuring things out phase, but as they're figuring things out, it is going to be more of the same. With the announcements that Disney made, I feel like that just completely changed the shift, that completely shifted the power balance within the entertainment industry overall. Because that was just such a dominant play and such a dominant announcement. It's really unbelievable. So I'm sure we'll hear more about that throughout 2021. If they play their cards right, they will cover a lot of the production of these things. And that could get us through 2021 in many ways, even if Disney didn't have a whole lot already in motion. But yeah, I agree. I agree with your assessment on 2021. I think that's where we're at. But overall, excited about Star Wars personally. And
yeah, absolutely.
Right.
What Disney is doing, it is very exciting. I'm by no means a Disney fan, though. I'm not exactly, rooting for the corporation itself.
No.
Hopefully that these moves do shake things up in a positive direction for the industry in the future. I just think it's going to take a while for people to actually catch up and realize what's actually going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, I think a cool thing to do for the next episode, I usually do this on Sovryn Tech, but I think it'd be fun for you and I to do it, is we should do a best of 2020. Like best TV series, best movie, best, just go down some kind of list of best ofs.
It's going to be a short list.
There it is. Yeah, it might be a short list, but you got to give people something. That's hilarious. Yeah, right on. Well, anyway, I think that'll do it for this episode of TIE Fighter Renegades. And I think that actually already did it for the next episode too. But we'll leave it at that. Always best of times, Rob. And well, everyone else, Hail Ming.